otherwise known as no sooks, no lefties, or you may know them as Bronwyn, Matt and Jim. There's lots of ways to get to it. So these laws that are about to come in to place, Labor says they're going to back it, but each way elbow, we'll wait and see what actually happens in the end. At its heart, you know what they're about. I couldn't be happier that these things are taking place. It's why I think the country in part made the decisions that it did last year. But for those that need a little bit more detail, here's Eliza Edwards with the details of what is coming to stop these dirty deals.
China, the clear target of unprecedented new laws, giving the Foreign Minister the power to veto foreign deals struck by states, local councils and universities.
Will apply to existing and prospective arrangements.
We support the power. We'll look at the legislation, make sure it's workable.
Sister city relations and research collaborations could fall foul of the new laws, and Victoria's controversial Belt and Road Agreement with Beijing, signed 2 years ago to attract more infrastructure investment, would almost certainly be torn up.
Pretty clear test. If they're inconsistent with federal foreign affairs policy, they'll go.
So again, Jim, we wait and see the details of all of this, but you know the logic of it and the buildings behind it. What's an example? We know about Belt and Road, but what are some other things that this would potentially cover?
Well, a lot of these things I think are fairly inconsequential. There are an awful lot out there of the 130 that the Prime Minister mentioned, which are memorandums. So if you get a delegation going overseas, suppose it's a trade delegation. They don't have much to trade with at the moment. They're going to a place where there's not much they can trade with. They'll go over there with a memorandum of understanding. A memorandum of understanding says we love you, you love us. Maybe in the future we'll do whatever we can. We go across and we sign a memorandum of understanding. That's quite legal for the states to do. They can't go across and make a treaty. That's against it. But I think we will discover what this is about as the Prime Minister starts to apply it. And it doesn't only apply to states, it may apply to certain universities controlled by the Commonwealth. And I think that's where we're going to see a very interesting innovation in this, because we're looking for ways to ensure that, to encourage universities, in the first instance, before we use a cudgel, to encourage universities to look after the national interest. That's what this is saying to us. There is a national interest. This is very serious nowadays that we take notice of the national interest.
I think of it in some ways a little bit like the Foreign Investment Review Board, where there is a system that can ultimately step in and say no, but there are thresholds inside that system. It's not no to everything, but there are moments when you step in and say no. And one of the reasons we want elected officials, not bureaucrats, on top of things is like that dairy deal, where all the bureaucrats say yes, 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 and then the Treasurer turns around and says no. Matt Canavan, as the states' rights man, how do you feel about what is about to happen here?
I fully support this. This is well within the Commonwealth's realm, obviously dealing with foreign governments and external powers. Should be the kind of laws we do impose, because we've seen state governments encroaching on what should be the Commonwealth's rights, as you've seen with Victorian Government's Belt and Road Initiative. And I'm really glad we're capturing universities. I don't think a lot of people would know that universities are established, or most universities are established under state law. And so they do come under state governments in terms of jurisdiction. But I don't think state governments have the right approach or really the wherewithal to cover off on potentially agreements struck between universities and other nations' governments that are against our national interest. Look, I don't really see why we should have any foreign governments funding schools or institutions at our universities. This is not about China, although obviously we've seen that with Confucius Institutes. There shouldn't be madrasas. There shouldn't be Confucius Institutes. There shouldn't be Benjamin Franklin Institutes or something either. They should be higher places of learning to focus on Australian values and Australian learning, not those of other nations' governments.
Now, can we show Chairman Dan and his reaction to it? Because, honestly, it is startling, and then Bronwyn, feel free to tee off. But here is the Premier suggesting that somehow the Prime Minister should have other things to do than look out for the national interest.
Well, look, if the Prime Minister's got time to be doing those things, then that's fine for him. I don't. I am exclusively focused on fighting this virus. I'll leave that to the PM to announce. But presumably that's coming, and it's coming pretty quick.
And in the event it doesn't?
Well, I wouldn't want to speculate on those things. I'll leave it to the Prime Minister. He seems rather focused on these matters.
You seem pretty angry about this announcement from the federal government.
No, I wouldn't read that into what I'm saying at all.
Bronwyn, there's a lot in that, including a fundamental misreading of what apparently the deal is that he had done. The idea that it's a cut-off about trade. Private companies are still able to do whatever they want. It's about those state instrumentalities. But what about that central thing that essentially, the Prime Minister, by not focusing on the virus, isn't really focused on the real issues?
Well, this is the arrogance of the man, isn't it? This is the man who wants another 12 months of being able to tell people that they have to be locked up in their own homes. This is the man who really is implementing something that's akin to martial law. And he thinks he's going to be thwarted. Well, the fact of the matter is that he and his ilk have been going across to China and giving more importance to what they want than to what people want in Australia and what our national interest is. But bear in mind, this legislation is just the beginning. I've been calling for action and less talk. I want action and I want to see it happening. So the sooner we see that legislation in and the sooner we're seeing action taken under that legislation, the better. Now, when it comes to the question of universities and local government, that's very relevant as well. But don't stop there. We've got this whole question of the need for cheap electricity so our manufacturing can get going again. So get the hell out of Paris. Get out of the submarine contract. Sorry about that, Jim, but it's got to be addressed. It's getting out the big red pencil. We will have this submarine debate. I keep forgetting until it gets mentioned every week. It's that big red pencil to get rid of the red and green tape. When I hear that there's a proposal for something to happen in one state and then they look at the green tape that's bound up in Commonwealth legislation, get rid of that. Get out of that. So there's so much more. Cut taxes, but don't pat ourselves too much on the back and say, wow, we've done this, that's enough. No, it's not. This is just the beginning.
One hell of a big first step, if there is a first step in here, but there's lots of other steps that have been taken. But I'm with you about the constant need for this, and I don't think there's going to be any disagreement around the table. But Jim, again, as a bloke who understands logistics in wartime, look, I get it, it's a press conference, he's tired, okay, I understand. But I think that Daniel Andrews can't sort of have it both ways, right? Where he's literally out there saying, the only thing I'm focused on is this. Well, the whole of the Victorian government isn't just about the virus. It might be focused as the priority, but as I said, child protection still exists. Education still exists. What's some free advice, organisationally, you'd give to the Premier of Victoria?
And I've given it to him a couple of times and he hasn't thanked me for it yet. But I think there is something in Management 101 which is very, very important. And that is the person at the top should not totally get himself involved or herself involved in the detail of what's going on. You need someone somewhere in an organisation who can oversee and look down on everything. And I saw this most clearly when we stopped the boats, when we did border control. The ability of Scott Morrison as the minister not to be fundamentally involved in every detail that went on, but to trust the people that were under him, but still there was one person responsible. Now, I would have suggested to Premier Andrews that if he had a COVID czar that worked for him, that was a competent person that had done big things, and you can find administrator in business or in the military or somewhere who can do big things, then he sitting up there may have noticed quarantine. Or the person below him may have said, let me sit down and identify the points that are going to break on this. Quarantine's one of them. I will be paranoid about quarantine. And whereas at the same time, he's looking after child protection and 1,000 other things. Look at the way Morrison has done other things, not just COVID, and we've done them well.
Yeah, very good point.